this book. Read this book. It really is great. You don't have a copy of it yet, Roger, do you?
Yeah, I started reading it last night.
You did?
Yeah.
All right, so then Scott, you have this event coming up on the 15th, January 15th, where you're going to be reading parts of that book, and you're going to be having a late lunch at the Samovar, Russian Samovar Room on 52nd Street. And that's from 4 to 6 on the 15th. Let me ask you first, Rob. I mean, we talked about the Scorpion King the last time, which gives you a whole history of how this arms race began. And this one's really about some hope, where we actually had a shot at cooling down this arms race. Is that the reason why you wrote this book?
I wrote the book because it's an important story. I mean, I tried to write this book a long time ago. We're coming up on the 35th anniversary. So I'm not quite as senior as the both of you. I'm getting there. The 35th anniversary of the treaty being signed, 1988. And it was a story that needed to be told, I believe, early on, because it was so important, and nobody knew anything about this. Nobody knew about what we had accomplished, why we had accomplished it. And then it's a story that got forgotten because the Soviet Union went away. People stopped treating Russia with respect. We treated them like a defeated enemy. We forgot the importance of getting rid of nuclear weapons. America re-embraced nuclear weapons. I talk about that in Scorpion King, our addiction to nuclear weapons. And it just disappeared over time. It was also a difficult story to tell because I wasn't permitted to tell it. It turns out the treaty prevents former inspectors from saying anything about what they learned in the inspection. So it wasn't until Donald Trump withdrew from the treaty in 2019, and then Russia followed suit, that I was legally allowed to write this story. And as soon as that happened, I said, I got to do this. And it just so happened that the book came out at this point in time where relations between our two countries are just at this absolute, it's the worst most people I've ever seen. I will say this. I was alive in the 80s, and I know you guys were. Hey, Roger, I just want to say about this. The Final Cut was one of the defining albums of my 80s experience. I listened to it all the time, and I took it to heart. But the fact is, in the 80s, things were horrible. We nearly went to nuclear war several times with the Russians, with the Soviets. We were facing off hundreds of thousands of troops on each side of the East German, West German border. We were ready to go at it. We called them the evil empire. They called us enemy number one. And yet they were able to take people like me, a Marine who spent his entire career learning to kill Russians, send them over to the Soviet Union to work outside of a ballistic missile factory that produced missiles that were designed to hit American cities. We, with a morbid sense of humor that most American military people have, we named the first 3 missiles coming out of the factory during our time: Pittsburgh, Des Moines, and Chicago. And afterwards, we were told not to name missiles anymore because the people in Washington, D.C. didn't find it funny. But the fact of the matter is, we were in the Soviet Union, working with the Soviets. We successfully implemented a treaty that got rid of an entire category of nuclear weapons that threatened the world with global annihilation. And we did so in a cooperative fashion with the Soviets, with the Russians. They weren't the epitome of evil. We weren't the epitome of evil to them. We were humans working together in the cause of advancing humanity so that generations after us wouldn't have to fear the world ending that quick in nuclear annihilation. So I wrote the story to try and tell the history. But what's happened is I've written something that is a template for the future. When people say, how do we get out of this mess? How do we find this off-ramp? I say, read the damn book. Read the darn book. I apologize for that language. Sometimes I swear. Read the book. And, it shows that it can be done. There is a way for us to work together. And if you think things are bad now, trust me, it was worse in the 80s. It really was.
Roger, your thoughts about what you've read so far in that book?
Well, just to prove to you that I actually did read some of the book yesterday, because I opened the package and there it was. I was very pleased to see it. The bit that I read, which was, maybe it's only the foreword, but maybe it was chapter 1, is him sitting outside a factory about 600 miles east of Moscow, an engineering factory where they're making, I think the S-22s was the thing. and he's the idiot Marine who they put in charge of a scanner of railway trucks, where he's supposed to be able to see whether or not they are illegally or against the terms of the treaty moving missiles that they're supposed to have stopped making out and putting them somewhere. And correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, but that's what I got from the bit that I read. So and it began with V, and it was a town, and you were going to tell me a lot more about the social implications of what happened, because people were going to lose a lot of jobs in that town, because the whole town had been geared up just to make these missiles so that they could keep the balance of power, or whatever their motivations were for all of this. So it's a fascinating beginning to the read. I also skipped to see how many pages long it was, because it's quite thick and there's quite a lot of chapters. This is going to be a challenge for me, like to actually read all it, because it's very detailed, but it also seems fascinating. Well, when I pick it up again, I'm going to skip to the last few pages and read that, and then go back and dip and pick and choose.
Scott, he's got a PDF. Can you send him a book? Can you send him a book?
Please give me an address and I'll send you a signed copy of the book. No problem.
I got one. He sent me one, and so he always comes.
Listen, I've got my copy. When we meet, all right, we'll have a drink and you can sign it then. We don't need to go sending me signed copies of books. But what was I going to say? I was going to say something fascinating. The reason I was late was because I was talking to Brianna. I think she's called Love May, and she does a podcast thing, a bit like this, a TV show. Very intelligent young woman, and I had to say, "Fuck me! It's 3. I'm supposed to be talking to Randy and Scott Ritter. I've got to go," and I left. And so
right in the middle of it.
Right in the middle, yeah. Wow. And she was brilliant. She just went, "Oh," I said, "Can I come back and finish this conversation, please?" And she said, "What, you mean later today?" And I went, "No, not later." When I'm finished with Randy, I shall be all bloody talked out. I won't be ready. No, another time. I want you to have me back on, because this has been a fascinating conversation. But interestingly enough, we were talking a lot about war, and about the conversation that one always has about what happens if there is another Hitler, like this. Because now we're being constantly told that Putin is the new Hitler and he wants to invade Europe and kill everybody and take over the world and blah, 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 blah. That's the story that's being sold us by the Secretary of State Blinken, or whatever his name is, and Sullivan and the other advisors to that bloke who can't get up the stairs into an aeroplane. I've forgotten his name now, but anyway, it doesn't matter. It's none of my business anyway. And so what do I want to say about this? So I had to say to her, listen, this is my plan. And this is where Scott's book comes. This is my plan, I said to Bianca. What we have to do is somehow we have to break out of the Overton window of the things we're allowed to discuss. We're allowed to talk about women's rights and abortion and things, but we're not allowed to talk about the fact that we're destroying the world and all of those things that are maybe even more important. Yes, I would say forget about the new Hitler. It doesn't matter. What we have to do is focus on the idea that we don't get involved in another war for 100 years, because we need now to focus on the fact that we're destroying the planet. And part of the way we're destroying the planet is because we're allowing our attention to be focused on Russia and China and the Ukraine and Libya and Syria and Iran and Iraq and all of these places, i.e. on having wars with people. And we're being diverted from the reasons why we're having these wars with people. I have my theories as to why we're having wars with people. But my great aim and hope in life is that I can help us move towards a tipping point where we, the people, get to dictate to our leaders that we do not want to be involved in a war for at least 100 years, because we've got much more important shit to deal with, like climate change, for instance, or the fact that there's old ladies living in cardboard boxes in all our big cities, and they're fucking hungry and cold. And by the way, our children can't get a decent public education because nobody's interested in educating them, because we want to keep them ignorant. And. What might happen in a country that was properly run for the benefit of its citizens, i.e. we the fucking people? All right, so I was sort of saying that to Brianna, and then I had to say, oh, sorry, I've got to go. But, I mean, we can continue having a conversation that's like that, because I'm certain that this is what Scott's book is going to be. Because I've read Scott. I read everything that he writes. You know, the stuff that gets sent on to me, because he's constantly quoted by Whitbeck and, you know, and these other people whose streams I follow. In the background, outside the Overton window, we're having conversations about real things, Randy, you, and
yes,
like Julian Assange, and the reason why perpetual war is a really, really, really bad idea. And to not believe the Blinkens and Bidens and Sullivans who say, no, it's actually a really good idea because we can make fortunes. Well, we're doing it. And we don't give a fuck what you think. And we couldn't care less about your grandmother, even if she is living in a cardboard box in the street and is cold and hungry and all those. We don't care about that. What we care about is the bottom line, because that is what our country is about. And we've all agreed to it, and we've all signed on. And your grandmother should pull herself up by her bloody bootstraps, you know, if she's cold and hungry. And obviously what I'm saying sounds like rubbish, but it's not, because we could look after her if we weren't sending billions of dollars to the Ukraine to blow Russians and Ukrainian young men and women to pieces. We could be looking after the old lady living in the cardboard box, and we should be, because she's our sister and we love her because she's a human being, and because we need to attach to the bits of us that care for our fellow human beings. And we should attach to them even if they're Russian or Chinese or Afghanistani or Iraqi or whatever they are. Scott's nodding because I know we have a lot.
Your thoughts, oh, Scott, your response to all of that.
Well, first of all, I'll start off by saying that about the book. You're right, Roger. What the book's about, and you'll see when you get into chapter 1, and you get to where I start talking about my role in it. I was in the Marine Corps. Hey, by the way, today's the 247th birthday of the United States Marine Corps. And normally we celebrate it by having Marines gather around, cut cake, oldest serves to the youngest, etc. But and I know it's a little incongruous to speak of the birthday of the Marine Corps celebrating, one of the world's most elite fighting forces. But I'll bring it. I'll explain in this context. Marines celebrated with Marines, but you know how many Marines don't get to celebrate the birthday today because they died in conflict over the past 20 years? Do you know how many wives no longer have their husbands sitting next to them? How many mothers have their son able to come home for the holidays? How many empty chairs there are because of these conflicts? Conflicts have accomplished nothing, by the way, nothing. Yes, Marines earned some medals on their chest. Yes, we're a proud organization, and I'm damn proud of being a Marine. But I also am able to put it into context that war is not the solution. Killing people is not an honorable profession. Defending your country could be an honorable profession, but killing people isn't. And I think the best way to celebrate the Marine Corps birthday going forward is as many Marines humanly possible celebrating it with you, meaning that we do everything to ensure that between now and the next birthday, no Marines die in combat. Nobody dies in combat. We avoid war. I trained when I was in the Marine Corps the first 2 years to do nothing but kill Russians. Literally. We spent the whole time learning to kill Russians. I was in a nuclear-capable artillery unit, so we spent a lot of time training how to fire nuclear artillery shells at the Russians. And this book talks about me and other Cold Warriors being sent on this mission to the Soviet Union where we had to work in cooperation with the people that we were learning to kill. And that's a huge jump. That's a huge mindset shift. And I show up in the Soviet Union, and it was literally this I don't know how to describe it, like a magical moment, because I'm arriving in this place that I'd been studying my entire life, meeting people who I was trying to kill, learning to kill, and finding myself liking them, identifying with them, realizing that they're human beings just like me. One of the moments in the book that resonates with a lot of people is the celebration of New Year's on 1989. From 1988 to 1989, I was invited into the homes of one of these Soviet former missile producers who is now responsible for working with us to inspect these missiles. And when you invite people in your home, it's a very intimate thing, very intimate thing. I mean, you come into my home right now, you're going to see the whole ugly reality of the Ritter household. That we have 3 dogs, one who tore up a couch. We have stuff all over the place. It's not the Ritter household where I'm prepared to let the whole world see the fake me. It's the reality of me. And when they let me into their homes in the Soviet Union, I was seeing the reality of them, a very intimate moment. It was a very human moment with these people who, like me, had been spending years building missiles trying to kill people like me. And now we're working together, and not just working together, we're living together in harmony. It was just this great moment. The whole experience was a great experience. It was tough work, and we didn't always see eye to eye. But at the end of the day, we were fellow humans trying to do the right thing for humanity. And I went on after that. This is not covered in the book, but I fought in the Gulf War, Desert Storm, and I was involved in counter Scud activity, hunting down Iraqi missiles and doing some stuff. It was about killing Iraqis. And I have to tell you, I did it. I didn't personally see anybody I killed, but I ordered bombs dropped on targets that killed a lot of Iraqis. And I was okay with it because it was war. But then afterwards, I was sent to Iraq as a weapons inspector. And you would think that that's okay. I mean, that's what suddenly the Iraqis stopped being this abstract notion. They started being real people. And I realized that they were good people. They were intelligent people. They were smart people, and they were suffering because of the war that my country waged on them. And I spent 7 years working with these people in a cooperative fashion, trying to resolve the issue of Iraqi weapons of mass destruction. And I walked away from both the Russian experience and the Iraqi experience convinced that war cannot be the answer. War should never be in the solution set of any problem. That there has to be a better way than going to war with nations, building weapons capable of destroying the world, or engaging with the people in a destructive fashion. I don't know how, I'd go into these bazaars, marketplaces, and you'd see the wives of dead soldiers selling their goods to try and make ends meet. It was tragic, and it broke your heart knowing that you were probably the cause of at least some of their deaths. I'm a big fan of being proud of who you are and what you came from. And that's why I celebrate the Marine Corps birthday. I'm a bigger fan of humanity. I'm a bigger fan of people learning to get along in a cooperative fashion with other people. And there's just, war can never be the solution. I agree with you, Roger. But I will go one further. Don't eliminate for 100 years. Eliminate it forever, man. War just is no good. There's just no reason to do it.
Yeah, Roger, your response. I hear some echo back. We could. Somebody got their some device on. Please take a look. But Roger, let me go right to this. I mean, do you think? Because I didn't up until recently, the last 4 or 5 months. I've been thinking about nuclear war at night. Do you think about it now, Roger?
Me now.
Yes.
Yeah, of course I do. I think about it. I think about it every day. I write about it every day. I communicate with people about it every day. I tell every time I'm on a program like this, I say it scares the shit out of me. Every single gig, I play Two Suns in the Sunset, which is the song I wrote. It's the last track on the final cut. That's
on the final cut, yeah.
And it's about, a guy driving along in his car, and suddenly the Third World War starts, and he realizes that it's all over and we're all dead. And we're closer to that moment now than I've ever been in my life, and it scares the shit out of me. And when I say that to audience, say 16 or 17,000 people in an arena, I can tell, but they sit there very still, and they do me the courtesy of not shouting at me or whatever, and they listen to what I say, and I sing the song, and I can see that they're moved by it, and I see that they get that I think that we're all together in the same predicament, and I sense their feeling of not frustration exactly, because they're not really aware of it, but they're confused. I sense an immense confusion because I sense, above all, they're not all of them. There's always a handful of people who are going, yeah, I love the Final Cut. It's one of my favorite records, blah, blah, blah. But most of them are going, what's he talking about? He's not serious, is he? He can't be serious about this. What? This is nonsense, isn't it? I'm not frightened about nuclear war. Why are you scared? Because I read. Because I read. That's why I'm scared. And I've read the whole history of what's gone on in the last 20 years in Eastern Europe. I know I was in Berlin in 1990. I did the wall in Berlin on July the 20th, 1990. Leonard Cheshire was the man who asked me to do it. He was an observer in a plane when the Enola Gay dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima. He came home and started homes for wounded servicemen in England, the Cheshire Homes as they were known. And he worked ever since. He, interestingly, Scott, knew lots of people in the Russian government, and maybe around the time that you're talking about, exactly the IMF treaty, he kept giving me presents that were made from scrap metal from SS-20s or whatever things were. But there was all. I think actually you talk about the St. George and the old missiles in the UN in New York or whatever. Well, I related to that absolutely, because Leonard was always saying to me, yeah, I've got General so-and-so who'll give us old missiles, or they're gonna give us military vehicles to use in your pop concert in Berlin and whatever. And Russia, and by the way, you can go and rehearse in East Germany, right? This is in 1990. You can go and rehearse with a Russian military band in this Russian military base. It's about 30 miles from here. So I did. I went. We couldn't fucking find it. You know why? Because not a single local German would tell us where it was. They were all scared stiff. But eventually somebody went, well, it's just around the corner. And we went round and I rehearsed this Russian band. And they played. They came and played on the 20th. They were playing, marching up and down, playing Bring the Boys Back Home or whatever, something in the wall. Why am I bringing this up? I'll tell you why I am. Because Leonard was that concert was for, he was called it the concert for disaster relief. The International Fund for Disaster Relief. And he started the concert by blowing a World War I whistle from the British Army for the men to go over the top and fight the Germans and what. And we had the mayor of East Berlin and the mayor of West Berlin shaking hands on the stage. And although most of the wall was up, we were playing in the Potsdamer Platz. And we'd had the whole thing with minesweepers, not minesweepers, they'd gone over the whole thing. And wherever they detected anything metal, they dug a hole because there was ordnance. It was full of ordnance. Nobody had been in the Potsdamer Platz since 1945. And we were there in 1990. And so it was a weird thing. And a few years later, I got to meet Gorbachev. I was so lucky. I can't believe that happened to me. I went to a Berlin Film Festival because they were giving me some peace award or whatever, and they were giving him the same thing. So I met him at the press conference that we did, and it was. I told him a story. I told Gorbachev this story. I'm going to tell it you now because fuck!
Okay.
I'll tell you now because it's a great. I really like this story, and it may not be relevant to this issue, but it is because it's people meeting in strange circumstances. So I walk into this press conference, and it's noon, and I see it. Everybody is a bit stiff, but I suddenly see in the corner of the room there's a bloke standing there with a tray full of glasses of champagne. I think, fucking hell, thank God for that. So I go over and I wash butt water down a couple of, and then suddenly there's people. It's filling up with women, and I suddenly see Gorbachev. He's on the other side of the room, and my heart's beating because I so want to meet him. you know. And then there's this incredibly beautiful woman comes in, young woman. And I go, fuck me. Blonde, right? And beyond devastatingly beautiful. And I suddenly put two and two together. I think, oh my God, that's his granddaughter who I've heard about. I can't remember her name. No, it's not. It's like one of those Russian names that all the princesses were called the same.
Natasha.
Oh, what?
Natasha.
No, not Natasha. Anyway, I'll remember her name in a minute. So I brush over to her, hoping that she speaks English, because I know he doesn't, because I've asked the question. All right. Turns out I say, are you his granddaughter? Yes, I am. I say, wow, how lovely to meet you. But would you like a glass of champagne? You know, and all that. And anyway, she couldn't have been nicer. And then I said, listen, I'd really like to. Does he speak it? No, he doesn't. I said, would you translate? I'd really like to sort of say hello. In fact, there's a story that I was told, and I want to see if it's true or not. And only he would know. And she says, duh, of course, you come with me, meet my grandfather. So we brush off, and he's standing there, and he's completely like that. Yeah. Oh my God, this is going to be hard work. So here's the story. And bless her, hey, while I'm talking, Google her name, please.
It's Anastasia.
Anastasia, there you go. I told you it was one of those names from 1917. I mean, she was one of the granddaughters of the Tsar, wasn't she? Who disappeared.
Right. Anastasia.
Anastasia. So Anastasia. So, and she says, I'd be delighted. So I go. So I said to him, right, here's the story. I know this bloke who was a junior minister in the Thatcher government back in the early 80s or whatever. And your grandfather was flying through Heathrow on a Tupolev something or other, on his way somewhere, and they had to stop at Heathrow to refuel. So my friend was one of the young diplomats sent to stand in a line and make sure he was all right for the half an hour it took to refuel the plane. So, and this is the guy who told me this story. So there they all are. There's about 20 of them all standing in a Nissan or something at Heathrow. And in comes Gorbachev, just him and an aide in their overcoats. They've walked across the tarmac and the plane's being refueled. They're all standing there, sort of nodding and going like that. And eventually Gorbachev, he's looking at them all, and then he turns to his aide and he goes, like that, in Russian. And so they all prick up their ears and things. And the aide says, President Gorbachev would like to know answer to the following question. And they all think, oh, jolly good, I say, I'm sure I can help, and blah. So Gorbachev goes, no, really, and the aide goes, President Gorbachev would like to know answer to the following question. How would history of world have been different if President Kennedy if President Khrushchev had been assassinated rather than President Kennedy? And they all go, fuck, that's hard, so they all take a step back because nobody can think of it. So Gorbachev lets them stew for 2 or 3 minutes, and then he does the thing with it. And his goon says to them, he says, President Gorbachev believes it would have been very unlikely if Mr. Onassis had married Mrs. Khrushchev.
That's good. That's a great story, Roger.
Hang on. Hang on. So she tells him that, and he looks like fucking thunder. He doesn't smile or anything. He's just like that. And he's staring at the ground. He wouldn't look at me at any time through that. And eventually, he doesn't look at me. He looks across at Anastasia, and he says something in Russian. And she looks back at me, and she says, my grandfather says, story completely untrue. Oh, fuck. And then she goes, but my grandfather say He like very much. Please keep telling. And then he went, "Ah!" And he threw his arms around a big bear hug, and it was amazing. And from that moment on, we did nothing but hug one another for days while it was all going on. William Astor, by the way, is the guy who told me this story, who was doing something with it.
I just want to.
Who is the father-in-law of David Cameron?
What are you showing?
Who became Prime Minister.
Now, this is one of those bits of missile medals that are turned into a watch. This is from the SS-18 missile. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you a question. That story there, Roger got along with Gorbachev. When you were at, is it the Votkinsk?
Votkinsk,
assembly plant. The people you were hanging out with, did you consider them to be a personal threat, or did you like break bread with them and drink from a samovar?
Well, first of all, we were very professional. Our job was to implement the treaty, and so we were very professional in our treaty implementation tasks. But when it came time to, again, I was smiling about something, probably shouldn't smile. We had an inspector have a heart attack. It was a very, very bad thing. And they had to evacuate him to the city of Izhevsk, where they had a cardiology center. And because he was an inspector with a classified background, we had to be with him 24/7 in case they put him under anesthesia and he started giving away secrets. And the cardiologists were just very professional. They stabilized him, and we eventually medevaced him out, and it was a happy story. He survived, all that good stuff. And now they want to get together with us because we had this bond for a couple of days where we're standing by watching them work on the guy, and we're seeing people. We say hi, but we don't meet them. So they say, could you come, and we'd like to invite you to a function. And the colonel, Doug England, comes in, he goes, can we do this? I said, why not, boss? Why can't we do this? Because I was running counterintelligence, so I was security. I said, sure, we can do this. And we went there, and it's us, me, the colonel, and maybe 5 other inspectors. And we show up, and it's like you said, Dower. We walk into their thing, and the head cardiologist is there with his staff, and they're all looking Gorbachev like, very dour. And we sit down, and I'm like, well, this is going smashingly. And he's sitting there, hey, thank you. How you doing? Thank you. Welcome to our city. Finally, he turns to the colonel and goes, our president, Gorbachev, has decreed a war on alcohol. And we're like, yes, we hear that. He goes, so I want to know, are you with me? Are you with me in this struggle? And one of our big questions was, what do we do about drinking? Because we're allowed to do diplomatic toasts, but we're not allowed to drink in the Soviet Union. We're not allowed to get drunk. Because, of course, the KGB will take advantage of us, take pictures and all this kind of stuff. And so I looked at the colonel, I said, we're with you. He goes, good. He brings out this entire case of vodka because we have many soldiers to kill. And we're like, son of a bitch, they trapped us. And then we're like, oh, then they take us into the next room, and there's literally hundreds of people there. They had a rock band on the stage. They were playing live music. It turned into this party with vodka being passed around, and it was just a nightmare. No, it was great, but we're just violating the rules as we speak. But they were just wonderful people, great people. I spent a winter night in a dacha in a banya, which is one of those Russian bathhouses, where you're pouring the water on the rocks and you're steaming, you're beating each other with birch. There was the colonel again, another colonel, me and a Spetsnaz guy, an Afghan veteran who was crazier than a loon. And we're doing this thing. The colonel's backed out quickly and just sat there drinking tea spiked with vodka. But me and the Spetsnaz guys, we're going back in. And it's a challenge now. Who can outlast? And we're doing this. And finally, and every time we'd finish, we'd go outside in the snow and roll around naked in the snow. And finally, the townspeople realized that there's this epic battle going on. So they carved a hole in the river, ice this thick, hole in the river. And we had to run through the town naked and jump in the river and then come out and run back. And we did that about 16 times before the colonel stopped because it was being insane. But I think that answers your question. Did I drink bread with them? Oh, no, Randy, we didn't drink bread. I ran naked through the snow with the Russians, okay? Come on, man.
Yeah. Well,
since they ate marijuana cookies. Yeah.
That illustrates the point entirely. Yeah, no, we don't want to. It's not 100 years. We don't want a war for 1,000 years. It's really bad for everybody except the people who are making money out of it. Smedley Butler, another Marine, wasn't he a Marine? He was.
Well, yeah. Legendary.
yeah, legendary. But you know, he was right. In 1929, I think he wrote his famous pamphlet, "War is a Racket."
War is a racket.
War is a racket,
Yep.
and he's quite right. And so what you say makes sort of, and you know, obviously the Russian people are people. They're like, we're all the fucking same, and we're all human beings. We're all African. That's one of the things that knocks me out, is the fact that we now know, because of the genome, and we've only known this for what, 10, 15, 20 years, we're all from Africa. We're all African. We look different because some of us went one way and some of us went another, and some of us intermarried when we were, and blah, 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 blah. Some of us are white, some of us are black, some of us are other colors, but we're all from Africa, and we're all related. We're all cousins, somewhat distant, some of us. There is no such thing as race. It doesn't exist. It's an invention. That it's been invented by people wanting to separate us one from another and control us. And so this stuff, these simple facts are really, really important so that we do stop having wars. And thank you for the work that you did with the IMF treaty, and I'm look forward to reading the rest of the book.
Right. So Scott, let me the same question I posed to Roger. And by the way, we are talking to Scott Ritter and Roger Waters right now. This is Random Critical live on Fly on WBAI and Progressive Radio Network. Scott, the same question. Do you think about nuclear war more than you did, or have you always thought it was imminent?
Look, I grew up in the 80s training to go to nuclear war. Okay. It wasn't just imminent. We were going to do it. Okay. It wasn't a joke. We trained actively to fire nuclear artillery rounds at the same time that my comrades in the Air Force were in missile silos training to push the button. My other comrades in the submarines were training to push the button. Other comrades still are. Yes, still are. But you know, today there's a little. The difference is today, there's no real threat. I mean, first of all, we've detargeted our nuclear weapons so that even though they're out there, in order for us to fire, we'd have to actually go in and reprogram the warheads. It was done on purpose to create a delay in case there was a mistake or an accident. But in the 80s, each missile had a target. Each missile was linked to a plan, had a target, and we were training 24/7, 7 days a week, 365 days a year to wage nuclear war, and so were our Soviet counterparts. This was real. I have to tell you, when I joined the Marine Corps, I was convinced that there was going to be a nuclear war, and that was going to be the fate. My father was a career Air Force officer. There was a book back in the 1960s called Alas, Babylon, and it's a terrifying book about nuclear war and all that. But that was the code name that an Air Force officer had to call his wife if nuclear war was starting, to give her a heads up to get the kids, get out, do something. Alas, that's the code word that my father used with my mom, Alas, Babylon. And my father would sometimes in Germany go down in the bunker before he'd call my mom and say, Alas, Babylon, meaning this is serious stuff that's getting ready to go down here. And then my mom would all scared and white in the face and tell us kids, okay, come together now, the water's here, this is this. That was my life, living ready to die. And then I joined the Marine Corps ready to implement nuclear conflict. It was real. We got rid of those weapons. We made it so that Europe could actually go to sleep at night and not worry about imminent nuclear annihilation. I really would like the European people to stand the hell up and thank me instead of going down this path of destruction by encouraging conflict in Ukraine that could lead to a nuclear war. You guys forgot what it was all about, you idiots. There was a time when all of you were going to die now. We got rid of that. People like me, people like the Russians over there who you hate now, they work to get rid of these weapons, and you can't even thank them, you son of a you-know-whats. No, I'm furious about this. So today we're in this environment, and I'm looking at it, and all I'm doing, I'm having flashbacks. It's like PTSD. I mean, this is why I lose my temper sometimes. Like PTSD. I'm like, we already did this. You know, how many times do we have to reinvent the wheel? We've already gone through this process, and we collectively agreed that it was stupid, that the world was going to end, so we're going to get rid of these weapons. And now we have a new generation of idiots like Tony Blinken, Jake Sullivan, Joe Biden, and the rest who are saying, hey, nuclear war. Why not? What the hell? Let's do it. Because the Russians certainly aren't capable. And Putin's sitting there going, hey, guys, he's given so many classic speeches. The one he gave, I think, in 2018, where he announced new categories of nuclear weapons. He's like, I didn't want to build these. He was apologetic. I didn't want to build these. but we had no choice because you violated every treaty we've ever signed with you. And I warned you, let's not do this. Don't get rid of the anti-ballistic missile treaty, but you did. You know, I was threatening to get out of the INF treaty. You said you weren't listening to me. So, hey, here's the weapons. Are you listening now? And you know what the answer was? No, they weren't. Because if they were listening, we, instead of promoting war in Ukraine, we'd be promoting additional arms control. You know, it took the United States and the Soviet Union decades to create a class of professional called the arms controller. People who knew arms control, could negotiate these treaties, understood the context, etc. And the success, you know, the proof of the pudding is the same. INF treaty, START treaty. We actually did it. We accomplished the job. We were getting rid of the missiles. We were making the world a safer place. Damn it, didn't we just forget it all and let it all go away? And today, we don't have that class of person anymore. There is no arms controller anymore. We have people who actually believe that a damn nuclear war can be fought and won. How do I know that? Because we built a warhead called the W-76-2 that we put on a Trident missile on board an Ohio-class submarine, and we've actually practiced pushing the button where we fire that missile against Russians. It's no longer fake targets. We're practicing to fire nuclear weapons against the Russians as we speak. We put nuclear bombs in Europe, and we hold an exercise where we put the damn bombs on airplanes and fly them in the direction of Russia. Oh, it's just training. Training for what? Suicide? Because that's what it is. This is like watching lemmings line up, getting ready to go off the cliff. Okay, we know how this is going to end, guys, but they're all new lemmings. They haven't learned that lesson yet. And they're like, yay, we're going for a trip. No, you're going to die. And that's what everybody needs to understand. Nuclear weapons will only end in one thing, nuclear annihilation. And if you want to save the world, then you got to get rid of the weapons. And the only way to get rid of the weapons is sit down and talk with the Russians. Stop talking about killing them and start talking about talking to them. It works. Trust me. I was someone who spent a lot of my early years learning to kill Russians. And I learned that that's the dumbest thing in the world, that the best thing in the world is to learn to get along with them, to get rid of these weapons so that we can travel over there. You know, Russia is a country with great history, great culture. Every American, the way I'd solve this problem is to issue every American a passport, a round-trip ticket, and $5,000 in spending money and say, go to Russia. I don't care what you do there. Just go there, meet the people, talk. And I'd encourage the Russians to do the same thing. We'd have this massive migration of people coming, and they'd look around and go, hey, the Americans don't have horns on their heads, and they don't have tails. They're not evil. They're not the devil. Maybe we can talk to them. I like them. I go to a bar. I get drunk. I laugh with them. Their women are pretty. Their men are handsome. And next thing you know, we don't want to kill each other. But instead, we stay at home, and we're told to fear the Russians. And that's where where does fear come from? Ignorance. Roger, you said something that was so important. How do you empower yourself? You read. You read. You have the intellectual curiosity to actually open up a book, open up a web page, read, empower yourself with knowledge and information, because knowledge is power. When you empower yourself, you get to do amazing things like have ideas that are fact-based, and then you get to do other amazing things like vote based on knowledge, not on somebody telling you how to vote, but on things that you yourself believe in. And I've spoken long enough. We've got Roger Waters on the damn shit. Let's listen to Roger.
Cheers. That was really wonderful. I got my diet soda here. All right. So, Roger, your response to Scott.
Well, you know, obviously what he's saying makes a lot of sense. It's we spend all day, every day, saying the same thing over and over and over and over again. So unfortunately, as Scott has pointed out earlier in this, we live in a world that is largely defined by state propaganda. And the world I live in is largely defined by American state propaganda. The whole of the mainstream media is completely tame and under the control of the American government. And I'm not being a conspiracy theorist, it just is. And they spend an awful lot of their time trying to teach us that there is an enemy out there, and at the moment they're called the Russians, and when we've killed all the Russians, we'll have to kill all the Chinese. They're already starting telling us that we've got to kill the Chinese. And it's completely insane, as Scott points out. It's a completely insane policy. But as Scott also points out, Chinese people are no different than you are. or Russian people. They're just ordinary people like us. We're just ordinary people trying to get by. It may be easier to get by in China because it's a socialist state, or it may not. Who knows? It may depend. I don't know, because I don't speak Chinese and I haven't lived there. I know about America because I do speak English and I've lived here for a long time, and I've seen what goes on, and I've seen how disgusting it is. I've seen how we don't care about our brothers and sisters, either in the United States of America or anywhere else in the world. This desire to have wars and kill people, and actually to control other people and to control other countries. You know, America, we, the people who live, I'm not a citizen, but I pay taxes here, so I'm allowed a voice, hopefully. We need to explain to our government that we don't want to rule the world. We don't want to tell the Venezuelans what to do, how to live their lives. Let them decide. Let them. How would you like it if the Venezuelans were trying to tell you what kind of a system to have? You, the people of the United States, have to tell your government how you want to believe. But you have to leave other countries alone. Stop interfering. The Monroe Doctrine was a terrible idea. And American foreign policy, by and large, for the last several hundred years, has been appallingly bad for you as well as for everybody. And everybody will come up and go, hey, what would you have done World War II if we hadn't come and saved your own? And I can have that conversation if you want at some point, you know, and we can have that conversation and we can say, listen, the history of the Second World War is long and complicated. I'm very glad that the Third Reich was stopped eventually, you know, but I'm talking about right now. War is wrong now. War in the Ukraine is wrong. You mean we should just let what you should do is negotiate a settlement. Now, Joe Biden, I've written all my letters to Joe Biden. I've written letters to everybody. I wrote letters to Mrs. Zelensky. I wrote letters to Zelensky. I wrote letters to Putin. I've spent a lot of my time writing letters to people, explaining to them that the war in the Ukraine is only good for people who are invested in the armaments industries. Nobody else gets anything out of it but people who are invested in armaments industries. That is what it's for. It's to create profit for people who are invested in those industries, which is supported by Congress, because in the United States, all the people who make the weapons that they use to kill innocent people all over the world are spread out amongst the 52 states, so that all 52 Congress representatives or whatever always support all the money that gets given to the Pentagon or gets given to the armaments industry to support that. Oh, we're going to lose jobs we're not going to vote for you unless you vote for Raytheon in Arizona. So whoever's the representative in Arizona has to support the budget, the military budget. So you spend this huge, vast fortunes every year making weapons. And then you have to drop them on people. You have to. You've got to create wars so that you can go bang, bang, bang. We need more. Or so that you can create a threat. The Russians, the Chinese. Oh, we need an even bigger Navy. We need more and more nuclear warheads. We need more submarines. We need new technologies. We need hypersonic missiles instead of, subsonic. We need this. We need that. We need the other. We need another million service people. We need this. We need blah, blah. It's just a way of stealing from the poor to be. What's that noise? Is that a doggy?
Yeah, there's a lot of dogs. We all have dogs. We all have dogs. That's one thing we have in common. And every dog that we have looks different from the other. I've got a Pomeranian. I got a Catone. You've got a Pit Bull, Roger.
Georgia Brown is not in here at the moment. She's half Pitty, half Chihuahua, my dog.
Yeah. Oh, I got a Chihuahua too.
Well, listen. All right, guys, this is a perfect time to take a break because I want to come back because you're both on a Ukrainian neo-fascist hit list. I want to talk about the war in Ukraine and about Julian Assange. Can you both stick around for a little bit, huh?
No, it's getting late. It's 4:20, for God's sake.
All right, for another 10 minutes. Can you stick around for another 10 minutes?
Yeah, another
Right.
10 minutes.
All right. So we're going
I went to my doctor the other day. This is interesting. And as I was walking out, I suddenly said, this bloke who opens the door and lets me in, he's for the last year or so or something. And I see him there and I always nod and I'm trying to be polite and say good morning or whatever. And I suddenly thought, I don't know his name. And it's something I try and do with people as often as I can. I go, what's your name? Just because it's nice. If you get to, and if you remember it, it means you can say, hey, Zoltan, or whatever their name is. Well, his name's Zoltan. Zoltan. And I went, oh, are you Hungarian? I can't remember. It was either Hungarian or Ukrainian. I think it's Hungarian. So anyway, I went back in like a week later or something for another visit to get my flu jab or whatever it was. And I went, morning, Zoltan. I thought, that's brilliant. I've remembered his name. And he went, morning, And when he came out, as I was going, I said, see you, man. See you, Zoltan, again. You're all right. Yeah. Yeah. And he went, I know about you. And I went, oh, Christ, we're going to go down Pink Floyd Road, And he went, but we weren't going down the Pink Floyd. He said, no, not your music. And I went, oh, what then? He said, and he went like that. And then he said, I, too, am on the list.
We're going to talk about that list.
What, you mean? He said, yes, Ukraine.
Wow. We're going to talk about that list in 1 second. We're taking
Isn't that amazing?
That's amazing. I got to take this 30-second break and say goodbye to New York and come right back with Roger Waters and Scott Ritter, and we'll talk about the hit list and both. All right? 1 30-second break here. Okay, that's Dmitry Shostakovich, and maybe I'll be on the hit list for playing that and be on the band list here in the United States. I'm Randy Credico, and we are talking with Roger Waters and Scott Ritter. So let's get to that hit list here. You are both on it. Roger, let me ask you, Scott. Roger had the last word. Are you fearful? Do you take it seriously? The Ukraine.
I take it seriously because people have died. I mean, to pretend otherwise is absurd. I also take it seriously because I live in the state of New York, and you say, well, Scott, you're a long way from Ukraine. Everything must be okay. But I'm not a long way from Ellenville, New York. And in Ellenville, New York, they have the Heroes Park where they have statues to Stepan Bandera, Roman, somebody who was a mass murderer. These are the Nazis who slaughtered Jews, slaughtered Poles, slaughtered Russians. And today they're treated as heroes in this park. There's Stepan Bandera, and there's Roman Shukovich or something of that nature. I apologize for not knowing the mass murderer's name.
You got it.
Yeah. And then there's the park, Heroes Park. And there's the statues again in the Heroes Park. This is in the United States of America, by the way. These are the people that slaughtered Jews, Russians, Poles. And every year they hold a summer camp for youth. And it's like a Nazi SS camp where they have torchlight parades. They wear the SS uniforms. They parade. They do the Sieg Heil thing. They got the Nazi memorabilia. And it's all in honor of these Ukrainian ultra-nationalists who are literally nothing but white supremacist neo-Nazis here in America. So, yeah, I'm a little nervous that they might decide to take a trip up to where I live outside of Albany.
Is that near Albany? Is that place near Albany? It is.
It's near me.
Miles.
15 miles away from here. And I was going to go by there, actually walk in the park. I went by and I spoke to Scott. And Scott said, if you're going to go in there, make sure you got a blue and yellow pin on your lapel. And I said, well, I don't have one. And that just made me nervous. And there are people floating around there with hats and everything. I said, I'm getting the fuck out of here. And I got out, and Kelly found those photos on Google.
I know in Albany I had extra security at the gig because there's a big concentration of Ukrainian refugees.
Right there in Cohoes. Yeah, right near here. Look, let me, I'll say this in Ukrainian listening. I weep for you. I weep for your nation. I weep for the suffering of your people. I don't support what you're doing to Russia, and I don't support what Russia's doing to you. But I'll tell you this: one side's on the right side of history, and the other side isn't. And the side that isn't defending the Nazis is on the right side of history. You can't sit here and expect me to be on your side when you worship as your national hero Stepan Bandera. That'd be like asking me to support Germans who re-elevated Adolf Hitler to, national hero status. I'm sorry, that just isn't going to happen. And they take umbrage at this, and I don't have any beef with you. I don't want to hurt you, and if you want to hurt me, here I am.
I had an experience with a teenager in the Ukraine at the beginning of just after the invasion. Alina was her name. And we had an interesting exchange of long text messages. And it suddenly stopped when somebody was looking over her shoulder. But she did at one point, in one of the things that was still her talking to me, say, "You're completely wrong about there being Nazis in Ukraine. There's not a single one. I'm 200% sure of that." And in my response to her, I had to say, "Babe, Alina, you need to do some research, because you may live in Ukraine, but you're so wrong about that, and it's so understood, and it's such a big problem, and it's so on and so on and so forth." So that was interesting. I don't know whatever happened to her. She kind of dropped out of the conversation and disappeared, but I think about her kind of often.
It's a very sad situation. I'll say this. Here's the thing that frustrates me the most, because, I'm a big boy. I've been around the world a couple times. I understand this. If the Ukrainians want to do something to me, okay, that's big boy rules. But what really irritates me is that I'm in the United States exercising my free speech rights, and it's the U.S. Congress that has passed money that funds the very center that put me on the hit list, and organized meetings using State Department personnel, people from the embassy, who organize the meetings as they call me an information terrorist, as they say I should be arrested and prosecuted for war crimes. And there isn't a single U.S. official going, "Oh, no, you can't say that. That's an American citizen exercising First Amendment constitutional protected rights in the United States. We can't be a part of this. So long, goodbye, we're out here." Instead, they're going, "Boy, I'll tell you what, why don't we one-up him? Why don't you turn his name over to the Mir Torrents, so it's not just a blacklist, but a hit list, so you can kill him. So you can actually put a target on his back." And, we live in the United States. Here's the thing. Political terror, political murder is a reality here in America. I mean, we got problems with gun violence as it is, with crazy people going around shooting up. But we also have a proclivity for putting targets on people's backs via the media and saying, these guys are bad. These guys should be dealt with. And when you call it a hit list and you glorify the fact that people get killed on it, what makes you think some idiot down in Ellenville, some true believer in Stepan Bandera, isn't going to go, whoa, the United States government is paying for this guy to be put on a hit list, and they aren't stopping it. I think they're secretly telling me it's okay to kill him. That's what bothers me, is that the U.S. government isn't doing anything to shut this down.
No, it is. It's iniquitous, and obviously it's very dangerous. And it was the daughter of that Russian academic who was killed in the car bombing attack in Moscow. And what they do, and they've got your picture, they've got your picture, they've got my picture there. And if they kill us, they then put liquidated across it. Yep. And they write the words liquidated across the picture of the person that they've killed, like they're proud of it.
How come nobody in Congress or nobody in the media, in the mainstream media, has spoken out against this? Have you complained? Have either one?
I've written letters. I've written letters to Schumer, to Tonko. I've gone public. But Randy, come on. This is the U.S. Congress that just allowed 4 Nazis into it. The Azov Battalion, the founder of the Azov Battalion, who was there from 2014, who has murdered and raped people in the cause of his white supremacist neo-Nazi movement, is allowed into Congress to meet people in the people's house. They let him and his thugs hold a memorabilia auction where they put off patches with Nazi symbology on it, and they raised $30,000+ in the people's house. Then they take them to Stanford University and give them a standing ovation saying, "Oh, hail the wonderful Ukrainian freedom fighters. They're Nazis. We know they're Nazis." Why? Because the same Congress that let them into the people's house 2 years ago were passing amendments to the Defense Appropriations Act saying no U.S. taxpayer money can be used train the Azov Battalion, same guys they just let in, because they are a white supremacist neo-Nazi group. We tried to put them on the foreign terrorist organization list because of the proclivity for race-based violence. But we suddenly forgot about all this and went, no, wait a minute, we rehabilitated them. They're okay. Bring them into the people's house. Let them raise money in the same hallways that, things like the Constitution is discussed.
Well, the United States put them in power in 2014.
Yep.
By organizing the coup.
Yep. No, it's I don't know. I don't know what to do but laugh. I mean, it's so absurd. It's almost like it's, if somebody wrote a script like this, I'm not an expert on Hollywood scripts, but I would say that if somebody wrote this script up and handed it to a Hollywood producer, they'd look at it and go, "Are you kidding me? This is crap. Nobody would ever believe this story. This is absurd." They toss it out. No, man, fact is much more complicated than fiction sometimes. And it is absurd. It's absurd that the United States of America, founded on the principles of freedom as set forth in the Constitution, would allow this to happen. It's not just me. Diane Sayre was a candidate for the U.S. Senate. She was running against Chuck Schumer. Chuck Schumer led the charge to get this money in the bill and send it to fund the center that then put Diane Sayre, his political opponent, on the list, calling her an information terrorist and then putting her on the hit list. Chuck Schumer is using U.S. taxpayer dollars literally to put a hit out on his political opponent, and nobody said anything. This should be front page news. This should be a national outrage. Instead, everybody's just going like, there's no Nazis in Ukraine. I'm 200% certain there's no Nazis. Some teenage girl told me in Kiev, no Nazis.
Roger, you've written to Mrs. Zelensky. What's her response to you? You've written a couple of times.
What?
You've written to Mrs. Zelensky, the wife.
Go online and read it. But it's all there. My thing. I haven't got it in front of me.
No, I'm asking you. What did she respond to you?
She responded once on Twitter. The response is always the same thing. Tell Mr. Putin to go home and then the war will be over. You never get anything sensible out of them. There's no conversation to be had. Actually, I discovered with Mrs. Zelenska. By the way, you have to say ska. You can't say ski. He is Mr. Zelensky. She is Mrs. Zelenska. So.
You've talked about him before. Just give us, people who don't know Zelensky's background, Scott, just an overview.
I'm going home in a minute.
I know. Wait, I got just 2 more minutes. That's it. All right.
Well, background: comedian, played a president on a TV show, got elected to president. Now he's the worst politician in Ukrainian history. He's responsible for the destruction of his nation, the death of his people, and that's it. That's the 30 seconds.
He should sell Ukrainian flip-flops. He's good at that.
All right, now I'm going to play one
good selling point for selling flip-flops.
All right, so the last 2 minutes, I'm going to get a statement from both of you because I have to bring in this video that Chelsea Manning provided to WikiLeaks, and just because I always have to throw in Julian Assange. We haven't spoken about him. You guys have been very vocal advocates, as have I. And so let's just play this. This is some collateral murder, just so I get it in.
Go.
One shoot. Light them all up.
202 traffic, 260.
Come on, fire. Hey, Roger. Keep shoot. Keep shoot.
Bushmaster, 2-6. Bushmaster, 2-6. We need to move time now.
All right, we just engaged all 8 individuals. Yeah, we got 2 bursts. We're still firing. Roger. Got him.
6 is a 2-6. We'll move, but we got this.
Oh, sorry. I was
bypass.
God damn it, Kyle. Sorry. I hit him.
I'm going to just both of you. I've seen that a million times, and it's still the visceral response. It's like so ghastly. Scott, why aren't those guys in jail instead of them trying to put Julian Assange in that prison in Colorado?
It's very difficult to charge military personnel with war crimes in a war. They can claim that they thought they were a threat. Look, I just watched the murder of 8 civilians. I'm sure everybody who watches that sees that. What you didn't see, and the thing that is even more disgusting, is when a van shows up later on in this clip, and they try to evacuate one of the wounded. Clearly, it's an incapacitated person. The person trying to put him in the van is a civilian, and they open fire on the van, killing the wounded man and the driver. And when they inspect the vehicle, they find there's a child inside, a child who survived, 2 children. So, look, it's a war crime, no doubt. You don't murder wounded people. You don't murder vehicles trying to evacuate wounded people, and you don't murder civilians who are milling around doing nothing. But that's what we did. And you know what's the worst thing about this? This is not a unique incident. This happened every day, every week, every month during the nearly decade-long occupation of Iraq. We didn't treat them, the people of Iraq, with any respect, any humanity. We laugh. I hit him. No, come on, man. I mean, I understand where you're coming from, but they weren't the enemy. This wasn't an armed opposition. They weren't trying to kill you. This was a Reuters newspaper or Reuters television crew that was investigating a story, and it was an innocent civilian trying to rescue a fellow human in need, and you killed him and nearly killed his 2 children. I'm disgusted by it. I really am. And I'm thankful that WikiLeaks put that out there so that the American people could see it and learn the truth about what we were doing in Iraq.
Roger, you get the last word. The last word.
I played the collateral murder video in every single show I've done since October 2010, which is when it was released by Chelsea Manning, and that all by WikiLeaks, when WikiLeaks got it from Chelsea. Every single show I've done, I use that video in it, disgusting as it is. And I will continue to do so in every single show that I do. Until when? Until we start to look at some of this stuff, until the Overton window opens enough that we're allowed to talk about these things, rather than it just being, don't want to hear, don't see no, like the 3 monkeys, see no evil, hear no evil, like spook no evil. No, the empire is right. Leave it alone. We don't want to talk about this. No, don't want to hear. And if you do hear, I'm going to ignore it. Perfectly happy to live in a state of perpetual war. Yeah, I don't care if I haven't got enough to eat. I don't care if I'm making $8 an hour. I don't, so long as we're fighting somebody, that's fine. They know best. The government obviously knows best. And I couldn't be happier that Jeff Bezos has got $1 trillion on a fucking desert island somewhere and doesn't pay any tax. Good for him, Oh, if only I could reach my bootstraps, I'd pull myself up by them, and then I wouldn't be dying of fucking hunger in the richest country in the world. Anyway, don't get me started. Awesome.
I want to thank both you guys, Roger Waters and Scott Ritter. This has been a